The night was supposed to be quiet. The sky above Colony Eden 3 was filled with stars, and the twin moons cast a silver glow over the vast green fields. It was a peaceful world, untouched by war. Children played in the open, their laughter filling the air just hours ago. But now, that laughter had been replaced by screams. Daniel Carter held his daughter, Emily, close to his chest as he ran through the burning streets. His breath was ragged, his heart pounding. Explosions ripped through the buildings around him, sending debris flying. The Zorvath had come. Their ships hovered above like silent predators, releasing squads of armored soldiers who moved with cold precision. The colony's defenses had crumbled in minutes. Emily whimpered, clutching her father's shirt. "Daddy, I'm scared." "I know, sweetheart," Carter whispered, his voice steady despite the chaos. "We're going to find a safe place, okay? Just hold on." He darted down an alley, avoiding the main roads where the Zorvath patrols were rounding up survivors. He knew what these aliens were like. They didn't take prisoners. They saw humans as nothing more than insects to be crushed under their boots. A shadow passed overhead. Carter pressed his back against the wall, his pulse racing. A Zorvath warrior, standing at least 7 feet tall, stomped down the street. Its armor gleamed under the fire-lit sky, and in its clawed hand was a plasma rifle, still glowing hot from recent use. The creature's reptilian eyes scanned the area, searching. Carter held his breath, keeping Emily tucked against him. He could feel her tiny body trembling. The Zorvath warrior paused, sniffing the air. Then, without a word, it moved on, disappearing into the flames and smoke. Carter exhaled slowly. He needed to get to the emergency bunker. If there were any survivors, that's where they'd be. He ran again, weaving through the ruins, his mind working on overdrive. He had fought in wars before, had seen what happened when an enemy had overwhelming power. But this wasn't war. This was extermination. Finally, he reached the entrance to the bunker. A thick metal door stood at the end of an underground tunnel. He rushed inside, slamming his palm against the scanner. The door slid open with a hiss, and he stepped in, sealing it shut behind him. Dim emergency lights flickered on, revealing a small room with supply crates and communication equipment. Carter set Emily down and knelt in front of her. "Listen to me, Em. We're safe for now, but I need you to stay quiet, okay?" She nodded, tears shining in her eyes. "Are the bad guys going to find us?" "Not if I can help it," Carter said. He pulled out his old combat knife from his belt, the same one he had carried during his years as a Marine. He hoped he wouldn't have to use it. Minutes passed. The sounds of battle above seemed to die down. Carter activated the radio, trying to reach anyone. Static. No response. Then, footsteps. His stomach twisted. A heavy thud echoed through the bunker. Someone was outside. Carter grabbed Emily and pressed a hand over her mouth, his muscles tensing. The scanner beeped. Someone was overriding the security system. The door slid open. A group of Zorvath warriors stood there, their armor dark and battle-scared. Leading them was a massive figure, easily 8 feet tall, with deep scars running across his reptilian face. His glowing red eyes locked onto Carter. Vorik, the Zorvath commander. Carter pulled Emily behind him, gripping his knife. He knew it was useless, but he wasn't going to die on his knees. Vorik took a slow step forward, the metal floor creaking under his weight. His gaze flickered to Emily, then back to Carter. "You humans, always clinging to the weak," Vorik said, his voice a deep growl. "It is pathetic." Carter said nothing. His mind was racing, looking for a way out. Vorik tilted his head. "Your kind should have stayed in the dirt where it belongs. You think you can stand against us? You are nothing." Carter tensed. He knew what was coming. Vorik raised his weapon, aiming not at Carter, but at Emily. Carter lunged, but it was too late. A single plasma shot rang out. Emily gasped. Her small body jerked. A burning hole appeared in her chest. Time seemed to stop. Carter caught her before she could hit the ground. His breath caught in his throat as he looked down at his little girl. Her eyes, once full of life, stared up at him. Her lips trembled, as if she wanted to say something, but no words came. Then she was gone. Carter's world shattered. His mind refused to accept what had just happened. His arms tightened around Emily's tiny frame. Vorik chuckled, the sound full of mockery. Now you understand, human. You are weak, and weakness must be erased. Carter's fingers dug into the floor. His entire body trembled, not with fear, but with something else. Something dark. Vorik turned to his soldiers. Kill him. We're done here. As the Zorvath soldiers raised their weapons, Carter slowly placed Emily's body down. His mind went blank. He wasn't a father anymore. He wasn't a miner. He wasn't even human. He was vengeance. With a roar, Carter moved. He was a blur, faster than the aliens expected. He grabbed the nearest soldier's rifle and twisted, breaking its arm before slamming the gun into its skull. The Zorvath warrior crumpled. The others hesitated for just a second, but that was all Carter needed. He ripped the plasma knife from a soldier's belt and drove it into its throat. Purple blood sprayed across the bunker walls. A shot burned past his shoulder. Carter ignored it. Pain didn't matter. Only killing them all mattered. Vorik watched with a frown, as if seeing something he hadn't expected. A single human, slaughtering his soldiers like an unstoppable force. Carter locked eyes with him, his breath ragged, his hands covered in alien blood. You monsters have no idea what you've done, he whispered. Vorik hesitated for the first time. And then the alarms blared. A voice echoed through the Zorvath's comms. Commander, we have a problem. The humans. They're coming. Vorik turned, his red eyes narrowing. In the distance, through the bunker's cracked door, Carter could see it. Streaks of light cutting through the night sky. Drop pods. Hundreds of them. The human fleet had arrived. Carter smiled, his eyes dark with fury. This war just started. The image of Emily's lifeless body burned in Carter's mind. It didn't fade. It didn't soften. It remained there, seared into his soul, fueling something inside him that had been waiting to awaken. The Zorvath thought they had crushed a weak species. They had no idea what they had just done. Carter stood in the middle of the bunker, surrounded by the bodies of the Zorvath soldiers he had slaughtered. His hands trembled, coated in alien blood. His breath was heavy, his muscles ached, but he wasn't done. Not even close. Outside, the colony burned, the screams of survivors fading as the enemy forces regrouped. Vorik had fled like a coward, leaving his men to die. Carter would remember that. A voice crackled through a damaged Zorvath communicator lying on the ground. Commander Vorik, human resistance in Sector 7 has been eliminated. Preparing for extraction. Carter picked up the device, gripping it so tightly it almost shattered in his hand. His voice was low, filled with an eerie calm. You made a mistake. He knew Vorik could hear him. There was silence on the other end. Then, a response. Ah, the father survives. Vorik's voice dripped with amusement. Still alive, even after losing the only thing that gave your pathetic existence meaning. You have my pity, human. Carter clenched his jaw, his vision darkening. Pity. He didn't want pity. He wanted vengeance. The ground shook as a massive Zorvath warship descended toward the city center, preparing to extract the remaining soldiers. Carter stepped over the bodies, his mind already forming a plan. He wouldn't let them leave. Not yet. He grabbed a plasma rifle from a fallen alien and sprinted out of the bunker, weaving through the wreckage of what had once been a peaceful colony. Dead humans lined the streets, some burned beyond recognition, others executed where they stood. His people, his family. The Zorvath would pay for every single life they had taken. Then something caught his eye. A distress beacon, still blinking on a fallen Marine's armor. Carter rushed forward and yanked it off. If this signal was still active, that meant someone out there was listening. He activated it, A voice immediately answered. "This is Admiral Ryan of the UNSC flagship Valkyrie. Who am I speaking to?" Carter inhaled sharply. It was real. Help was coming. "Captain Daniel Carter, the colony's gone. Zorvath forces are still here, but they're pulling out. You need to stop them." There was a pause. "Carter, we saw the transmission. We saw what they did." Ryan's voice was cold, controlled, but Carter could hear the fury beneath it. "We're already on our way." Carter's grip tightened on the plasma rifle. Not fast enough. Admiral Ryan exhaled. "Carter, stand by." "The fleet will." "I'm not standing by." Carter shut off the beacon. He had wasted enough time. The Zorvath were getting away, and he wasn't going to let that happen. He sprinted toward the city center, his pulse hammering in his ears. The Zorvath warship loomed ahead, its engines humming as it prepared to ascend. Hundreds of enemy soldiers moved toward it, their weapons still stained with human blood. Carter didn't hesitate. He lifted the plasma rifle and opened fire. The first shot took a Zorvath soldier in the neck. The second hit another in the chest, sending it sprawling. Chaos erupted. The aliens turned, confused by the sudden attack. One soldier spotted him and roared, raising its weapon. Carter was faster. He dove behind cover, grabbed a fallen grenade, and hurled it into the crowd. The explosion tore through their ranks, sending bodies flying. Alarms blared as the warship's engines flared to life. They were retreating. No, not yet. Carter ran, weaving through gunfire, leaping over wreckage. A Zorvath warrior lunged at him, but he ducked, driving a combat knife into its side before ripping it free. The alien howled before collapsing. He reached the landing zone just as the ship began to rise. His eyes darted to a fallen human soldier beside him, his body draped over a rocket launcher. Carter grabbed it, dropping to one knee. He took aim. He could see the ship's engines, glowing bright as it ascended into the night sky. He exhaled, pulled the trigger. The rocket screamed through the air and slammed into the warship's hull. The explosion rocked the sky. Fire erupted from the side of the ship, sending debris raining down. The mighty Zorvath vessel lurched, struggling to stay airborne. Inside, alarms blared as the crew panicked. Carter watched as the warship tilted, its engines failing. Then, in a deafening roar, it crashed into the colony ruins, erupting into a massive fireball. The remaining Zorvath forces scrambled, their once organized retreat turning into pure panic. They hadn't expected resistance. They hadn't expected a single human to take down their ship. But Carter wasn't done. He stalked forward, plasma rifle raised, cutting through the stragglers like a ghost of vengeance. One after another, they fell. The last one dropped to its knees, throwing down its weapon, its eyes filled with terror. Carter stood over it, breathing hard. The alien opened its mouth, perhaps to beg, but Carter had no mercy left in him. He pulled the trigger. Silence followed. The battlefield was his. Then, a distant rumble. Carter looked up. The sky was filled with fire. Human drop pods. Hundreds of them. The UNSC fleet had arrived. The ground trembled as drop pods slammed into the battlefield, their doors blasting open. Human Marines poured out, their armor gleaming under the burning sky. Carter stepped back as Admiral Ryan emerged from one of the pods, his eyes scanning the carnage. He looked at the burning wreckage of the warship. He looked at the hundreds of dead Zorvath scattered across the battlefield. Then he looked at Carter. "You did this." Carter exhaled, his hands still trembling. He nodded. Ryan's expression was unreadable. Then he pulled out his sidearm and checked its magazine. "We're taking the fight to them." Carter looked toward the stars, where the Zorvath fleet still lurked. They had come here thinking they could slaughter humans like animals. Now they would learn what it meant to make humanity angry. He picked up his rifle, standing tall. "Then let's finish this." Carter stood on the edge of the burning battlefield, his heart pounding as the sky above filled with human warships. The UNSC fleet had arrived in full force, their massive ships cutting through the darkness like blades. Bright streaks of light rained down as drop pods descended, slamming into the ruined colony with a deafening boom. Marines poured out, weapons ready, their faces hard with fury. The sight of their fallen comrades, the ruined city, and the smoldering wreckage of the Zorvath warship only fueled their rage. They had come for vengeance. They had come to remind the galaxy what happened when you made humans suffer. Admiral Ryan marched toward Carter, his gaze sweeping over the carnage. The man's uniform was crisp, but there was nothing polished about the way he carried himself. He was a warrior, hardened by years of battle. "Carter," Ryan said, his voice even. "You did good." Carter said nothing. His hands were still clenched around the plasma rifle, his fingers aching. Good? No, this wasn't good. Nothing about this was good. Emily was still gone. His people were still dead. And the Zorvath were still out there, thinking they could walk away from this. Ryan seemed to understand. He took a slow breath and looked toward the sky. "The enemy fleet is still in orbit. They think they've won," Ryan said. "They think we'll lick our wounds and disappear." His jaw tightened. "They're wrong." Carter's grip on his rifle hardened. "What's the plan?" Ryan's lips curled into a grim smile. "We hit them first." The command ship Valkyrie hovered in low orbit, its engines humming with raw power. Inside, the bridge was a controlled storm of activity. Officers relayed battle plans, tactical screens flashed with ship movements, and the hum of charged weapons filled the air. Carter stood next to Ryan, staring at the fleet of Zorvath warships displayed on the holotable. There were 30 of them, powerful, heavily armed, and ready to crush anyone who stood in their way. The UNSC had 10 ships, smaller, less advanced, outnumbered, outgunned, but not outmatched. Ryan pointed at the display. The Zorvath rely on overwhelming firepower. They think brute strength wins every battle. That's their weakness. He turned to Carter. "Humans don't fight fair." Carter's eyes flickered to the stealth corvettes positioned behind the enemy fleet. Nearly invisible, cloaked in cutting-edge tech, they drifted silently through the void, waiting for the order, waiting to strike. Ryan gave a single nod. "Drop the cloak." The moment the command was given, the corvettes decloaked. Before the Zorvath could react, before their shields could power up, hell was unleashed. The first missile barrage ripped through the rear of the Zorvath fleet, punching through their hulls like paper. Fire erupted from their engines, the force of the explosions sending debris spiraling into the void. 3 enemy ships were instantly crippled. Panic spread through the Zorvath ranks. Their formations broke, their captains barking frantic orders to their gunners. They had been caught off guard, and humans didn't stop attacking just because the enemy was confused. Ryan's fist slammed down on the table. All ships, open fire. The UNSC fleet surged forward, railguns spinning to life, hurling tungsten rounds through the darkness. Lasers sliced across the void, missiles screamed toward their targets. The Zorvath scrambled to return fire. Their heavy plasma cannons lit up space, sending fiery bolts toward the advancing human ships. One of the UNSC frigates took a direct hit, its hull cracking open as fire erupted from within. But the humans did not stop. Carter clenched his fists as he watched the battle unfold. This was more than just a fight. This was payback. A Zorvath dreadnought turned its massive cannons toward the Valkyrie. A single shot from that thing could tear through the human flagship. Ryan saw it too. His expression didn't change. "Carter," he said, eyes locked on the battle. "We need to take out that ship. Fast." Carter's pulse quickened. "Tell me what to do." Ryan nodded toward the strike teams suiting up near the hangar bay. They were preparing for a boarding mission. "Think you're up for a little face-to-face revenge?" Ryan asked. Carter didn't hesitate. He grabbed a rifle, locked his armor into place, and stepped onto the dropship. The boarding party launched in seconds, streaking through the battlefield. weaving through explosions as the Zorvath dreadnought loomed closer. Alarms blared as the human dropships pierced through the dreadnought's shields, landing on the ship's hull. Carter's boots hit the metal surface, and within moments, the fight was on. Human Marines stormed the corridors, weapons blazing. Carter moved like a ghost, weaving through enemy fire, dropping Zorvath warriors with brutal efficiency. He didn't hesitate. He didn't flinch. This was for Emily. This was for all of them. He pushed forward, cutting through the enemy lines, making his way toward the ship's reactor. They had one shot at this. Ryan's voice crackled over the comms. "Carter, plant those charges and get out of there." Carter didn't respond. He was already in the engine room, his fingers flying over the detonator, setting the explosives. The door behind him burst open. Vork, the Zorvath commander, stepped through the smoke, his crimson eyes locked on Carter. "You," Vork growled. His massive form towered over Carter, his armor still slick with human blood. "I should have killed you with your wretched child." Carter didn't speak. He lunged. The two clashed in a brutal melee, Carter dodging Vork's massive swings, striking back with everything he had. But Vork was stronger. He grabbed Carter by the throat, lifting him off the ground. "You are nothing," Vork hissed. Carter grabbed a plasma knife from his belt and plunged it into Vork's eye. The Zorvath screamed, dropping him. Carter didn't waste time. He slammed his fist into the detonator. The charges blew. Fire and metal ripped through the dreadnought, explosions tearing through its structure. Carter sprinted toward the hangar, leaping onto the last departing dropship as the Zorvath warship began to break apart. As he flew back toward the Valkyrie, he watched the massive dreadnought erupt in flames, a giant explosion consuming it. The first strike had landed. The underdogs had bitten back. The sky over Kepler Prime burned. Plasma fire rained down from the heavens as the Zorvath fleet descended upon the last human stronghold. The city, once a shining beacon of human progress, was now a battlefield. Smoke choked the air, buildings crumbled under relentless bombardment, and the screams of the wounded echoed through the shattered streets. Carter stood on a rooftop, gripping his rifle as he watched enemy dropships pierce the atmosphere. The battle was reaching its climax. Humanity's survival teetered on the edge of a knife. They had struck first, but the Zorvath had responded with overwhelming force. Admiral Ryan's voice crackled over the comms. "All forces, hold the line. No retreat. We stand here. We fight here. We end this here." Carter's heart pounded. He turned to the soldiers beside him, hardened Marines, exhausted but unyielding. Their armor was scorched, their faces streaked with dirt and blood, but their eyes still burned with determination. They had lost too much, they had suffered too much, and they weren't about to let humanity fall. A deep mechanical rumble shook the ground. Carter narrowed his eyes as he saw Zorvath war machines marching through the ruins, massive quadrupedal tanks, bristling with plasma cannons. Behind them, waves of alien warriors advanced, their energy blades gleaming in the twilight. The final battle had begun. Railgun emplacements on the rooftops thundered to life, unleashing a hailstorm of projectiles that tore through the advancing enemy ranks. Plasma fire erupted from the human trenches, cutting down the first wave of Zorvath soldiers. Explosions rocked the battlefield, filling the air with fire and death. But the Zorvath didn't stop. The war machines fired back, their heavy cannons blasting apart buildings and fortifications. Human soldiers were thrown through the air as the ground trembled beneath the impact. The sky was a storm of fire and metal as human fighter jets wove between enemy warships, engaging in desperate dogfights. Carter dove behind cover as a plasma blast obliterated the rooftop next to him. He rolled to his feet, raised his rifle, and fired into the oncoming swarm of enemies. His bullets found their mark, dropping 2 Zorvath warriors, but more took their place. A Zorvath soldier lunged at him, energy blade raised. Carter barely had time to react. He twisted, dodging the fatal strike, then slammed his rifle butt into the alien skull. The creature staggered, and Carter emptied his magazine into its chest. More enemies poured in. The battle was slipping out of control. Ryan's voice came through the comms again, this time with urgency. "Carter, we need a miracle. The orbital fleet is barely holding. We won't last much longer." Carter's mind raced. There had to be a way. They couldn't just defend. They needed to strike back. His eyes locked onto the Zorveth command station set up in the ruins of the old human capital building. That was their weak point. Destroying it could turn the tide. "Ryan," Carter said, reloading his rifle. "I'm going in." Ryan didn't hesitate. "Take whoever you need." Carter turned to his squad. "We're taking out that command post. We don't stop until it's rubble." The Marines exchanged grim looks, then nodded. They moved swiftly through the war-torn streets, dodging enemy patrols and weaving through the wreckage. The closer they got to the command station, the thicker the enemy presence became. Gunfire erupted as they clashed with a squad of Zorveth warriors. Close-quarters combat. Brutal. Relentless. Carter's blade found an enemy throat, while his squad covered his flanks. They pushed forward, cutting a bloody path through the alien defenses. Finally, they'd reached the command station. The towering structure loomed before them, guarded by a platoon of elite Zorveth soldiers. Carter took a deep breath. Hit 'em hard. The battle was fast and savage. Grenades flew, automatic fire tore through armor, and the air filled with the screams of the dying. Carter fought like a man possessed, every movement fueled by rage and loss. One by one, the enemy forces fell. Carter planted the charges on the command station's power core. His hands were steady, despite the chaos around him. He activated the detonator. The explosion lit up the night sky, sending a shockwave through the battlefield. The Zorveth forces hesitated. Their command structure was gone. Confusion spread through their ranks. And that's when the humans struck. Ryan's voice roared through the comms. "All forces, counterattack." The human army surged forward, taking advantage of the enemy's disarray. Fighter jets trafed Zorveth positions, artillery rained down on their war machines, and the Marines pushed with everything they had. Carter stood amidst the burning wreckage, watching as the Zorveth began to retreat. Against all odds, humanity had held the line. Kepler Prime still stood. Battlefield was silent. For the first time in days, there was no gunfire, no screams, no roaring engines of war. The smoke still clung to the ruins of Kepler Prime, drifting like ghosts of the fallen. Carter stood on a shattered balcony, his rifle resting against his leg, his breathing steady but heavy. The Zorveth were retreating. They had finally broken. But Carter knew this war wasn't over. Not yet. Admiral Ryan's voice came over the comms, quieter this time. "Carter, get to the command center. We're taking the fight to them." Carter didn't ask questions. He just turned and ran. Inside the underground bunker, the War Council was gathered around a flickering holotable. Ryan, his face lined with exhaustion, pointed at the Zorveth home fleet, now in full retreat toward their command station in the Drask Nebula. It was their last stronghold, the beating heart of their war machine. "They thought we'd stay defensive," Ryan said. "They thought we'd just survive." His eyes darkened. "We're done just surviving." Silence filled the room. No one argued. Carter exhaled slowly. "What's the plan?" Ryan turned to him. "We burned them to the ground." The plan was simple. Strike fast, strike hard, and end the war in one decisive blow. The UNSC fleet, though battered, still had the firepower to launch one final assault. There would be no second chances. 3 days later, the human fleet arrived at the Drask Nebula. Carter stood on the bridge of the Valkyrie, watching as the swirling red and gold gases of the nebula illuminated the massive Zorveth stronghold ahead. Dozens of warships were waiting for them. This was the last stand for both sides. Ryan's voice was steady. "All ships, engage." The battle erupted instantly. Lasers carved through the void, missiles streaked toward their targets, and railguns thundered. The Zorveth had sheer numbers, But humanity had strategy, resilience, and most importantly, nothing left to lose. Carter gripped the console as the ship shook violently. The Valkyrie narrowly avoided a plasma barrage, returning fire with a devastating railgun shot that punched through a Zorvath destroyer, splitting it in half. But the enemy kept coming. A squadron of human fighters weaved through the chaos, launching precision strikes against the Zorvath capital ships. Meanwhile, the stealth corvettes, the same ones that had decimated the First Fleet, slipped past the front lines, heading straight for the Zorvath command station. And Carter was with them. The dropship doors hissed open, revealing the glowing cityscape of the Zorvath stronghold below. This wasn't just a base, it was a fortress. But no fortress was impenetrable. "Move fast," Carter said to his team. "No mistakes." They landed hard, weapons up, and charged into the enemy stronghold. The fighting was brutal. Zorvath warriors met them head-on, and the halls were soon slick with alien blood. Carter led the way, his every step fueled by vengeance. They reached the control core. The room was vast, filled with pulsing energy conduits and flickering Zorvath displays. This was it, the brain of the entire Zorvath war machine. Ryan's voice came through the comms. "Set the charges. Make it count." Carter planted the explosives, his fingers moving fast, his heart hammering. This was humanity's final message to the galaxy. Then, the door behind him exploded. Commander Vorik stepped through the smoke. He was still alive. His armor was cracked, his left eye gone, but his hatred burned hotter than ever. "You vermin," he snarled. "You think you can destroy us?" Carter tightened his grip on his rifle. "We already have." Vorik lunged. The final battle began. It was brutal. No weapons, no tactics, just raw, desperate fury. Vorik was stronger, but Carter was faster. He dodged, countered, landed blow after blow. But Vorik wouldn't go down. Carter's vision blurred as a punch sent him sprawling. His ribs cracked, pain flaring through his body. Vorik loomed over him, raising a blade. And Carter grabbed the detonator. He looked Vorik dead in the eye. "This is for Emily." He pressed the button. The charges detonated, fire and energy ripping through the core. Vorik barely had time to scream before the explosion consumed him. Carter ran, his lungs burning, his legs screaming in protest. His team was already evacuating. He leaped onto the last departing dropship just as the Zorvath stronghold collapsed in on itself, explosions chain reacting through the city. As the human fleet jumped to safety, Carter watched through the viewport as the entire Zorvath war machine imploded, consumed by fire and death. It was over. The cost had been unimaginable, but humanity had won. The battle was over, but the silence that followed was deafening. Carter sat in the dimly lit medbay of the Valkyrie, staring at the floor, his hands still shaking from the fight. His ribs ached, his body was covered in bruises, but none of that mattered. Because they had won. The Zorvath homeworld was gone. Their mighty fleet, obliterated. Their empire, which had once stretched across the stars, was now nothing more than a memory. But at what cost? The doors to the medbay hissed open, and Admiral Ryan stepped in. His uniform was tattered, his face lined with exhaustion, but there was something in his eyes, something Carter had never seen before. Pride. Ryan sat beside him, exhaling slowly. "It's over," he said. "We did it." Carter nodded, but he felt no joy. Victory had never been the goal. Survival had been. And now that they had it, what was left? Ryan seemed to understand his silence. "You know what," he said, leaning back against the wall. "They're already talking about us." Carter looked up. "Who?" Ryan smiled faintly. "The rest of the galaxy." The word hung in the air. Humanity had been an afterthought, a species considered weak, unworthy, insignificant. The Zorvath had believed they could wipe them out without consequence. Now, the universe knew the truth. "They're calling us monsters," Ryan continued. "The ones who destroyed an empire, the species that refuses to die." He chuckled, though there was no humor in it. "Some say we should have begged for peace." Carter scoffed. "Peace?" He shook his head. "Where was peace when they burned our worlds? When they slaughtered our families?" Ryan nodded. "Exactly." A long silence followed. Then, the ship-wide comm system crackled to life. "This is Fleet Command to all units. Earth has confirmed. The war is officially over. Stand down. We're going home." Carter closed his eyes. Home. The thought felt strange. He had spent so long fighting, so long bleeding, that the idea of peace felt like a dream. Would he even recognize the world they had saved? But as the Valkyrie turned toward the void, Carter looked out the viewport. The stars stretched endlessly before them, silent witnesses to everything humanity had endured. They had been underestimated, attacked, hunted, and they had won. Across the galaxy, whispers began to spread, stories of the warriors from Earth, of a species that had been pushed to the brink and had pushed back harder. The universe had learned a lesson that would never be forgotten. Never make an enemy of humanity.